Well, thanks. Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Allison, for having me, and thank you all for coming. It is, as I want to echo Paul's words, it's a testament to this community to see the turnout here. It's amazing. I don't know how many people slide has, maybe 6,000, and we'd be lucky to get a turnout like this in Denver. So thank you so much for coming and learning about what we do. I'm particularly proud of what our team does in Denver and all over the world, as you'll see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the evolution of zoos over time, and then I'm going to go into more detail about what we do at Denver and how things are really changing and how we need to think of zoos as our institutions and make them what we want them to be. So think about that as we take this little journey. Let me see if I can. The little arrow buttons are not working. Oh, okay, so let's talk a little bit about zoos. So as you might have known, or you might or might not know, zoos have been around for millennia. The Egyptians had zoos, the Mayans and the Aztecs had zoos, and really what they started out as were menageries, places of interest, curiosities, places people would go, and usually wealthy people, usually the upper crust of society. The first zoos, more modern type zoos, were really owned by aristocracy. In the 18th century, the 19th century, sorry, 1800s, really is when zoos started to become public, starting in England and in Europe, and then later in the United States. And they really were more or less like a museum. We'd put animals in cages, we'd get a lot of animals, and we'd go to see these curiosities from all over the world that we were just discovering in that age of the end of the age of exploration. But as time went on in the 20th century, we realized that that really wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to just put animals in cages. It wasn't good for the animals. It wasn't good for us. It didn't really help us understand and connect to the natural world either. And so we started developing this idea of zoological parks or living museums. And you saw exhibits really changing. And I'll show you some slides in a bit, that they went from cages to more naturalistic exhibits where you felt a little bit more immersion. And today you even have exhibits where really you're the person who's in the cage and the exhibit is surrounding you, and that's more and more where zoos are heading. But by the end of even the 20th century, zoos started to recognize to remain relevant that we were facing what you all know is one of the greatest threats to our planet. In my mind, the greatest threat, which is the biodiversity crisis. We are losing species far faster than the average rate of loss, and we are now right smack in the middle of the 6th great extinction that this planet has ever faced. And the one thing that sets this extinction spasm apart from others, of course, is that we're the cause of it. You know, one of nature's own is really what's causing the extinction of all these other species. And that's never happened before. It's unique, it's different. And so zoos have decided that we need to be proactive. If we're about animals, we need to conserve those animals that we're about. We need to go into the field and do more to help protect them so that future generations can understand them. We need to develop education programs to help people understand about those animals, but we also need to do the kinds of things that my team does, which is go into the field and actually try to conserve species in the wild. So this is kind of, you know, the old Victorian zoo or early 20th century zoo, and again, cages, and really we've changed, and you can see, as I said, if you look at that aquarium picture, the aquarium surrounding the visitors. So there's visitors in the really confined space now with the animals all around them. And more zoos are trying to do that, big aviaries where you walk through, and the people are constrained to a smaller space, where the animals have more space. We're very concerned about natural behaviors. We're very concerned about showing people natural behaviors, giving them a sense that we're not the masters of nature. We are a part of nature. And so one of the things that some of the early research on attitudes and values has shown us is that with the old style zoos, people came away with stronger kind of dominionistic attitudes, this idea that we're the master and lord of the universe and animals are here to serve us. So the idea of the new zoo exhibits is to change that, to show that we're a part of that community of species out there. We're just one of many, and try to get that message across that we're no better or worse than the other species out there. We're just one of several. And so you're seeing a really, really big renaissance in the ways that zoos exhibit animals. If you come to Denver and you get a chance to go to the zoo, you'll see our exhibits are quite a bit different, where we have big spaces now, even for our elephants, 10 acres, and we move multiple species through exhibits to give them enrichment. We have behavioralists that we hire so that we can get these animals to display the full range of behavioral repertoire that they can, really enjoy their surroundings to the extent they can. And we no longer go about doing even medical procedures by forcing an animal to do anything. Now the animal has to choose to do everything. So if we do a procedure on an animal, that animal has to choose to want to do it. So we've really moved a long way in our attitudes towards those animals and how we take care of them. So today, zoos are really multifaceted organizations. They really include a variety of different things. They still have that entertainment aspect. And even though my PhD is in wildlife ecology, I actually have several degrees, and I have a lot of my degrees in the social scientists. I've always argued that if you want to understand the causes, or you want to solve the causes of conservation, those causes are really socioeconomic and political, right? They're not biological. And so we need to get this interdisciplinary perspective on how to address those causes. And so I've done a lot of research in the social sciences as well. And it's interesting, even in the zoo, that most people still go to the zoos for the entertainment. That's why they go. So if you ask people, and we ask people at Denver, why do they come? For entertainment, to have fun, for family outing. You ask them, what should the zoo do, and what should zoos be about? And they say education and conservation. So we find ourselves in a bit of a disconnect, that people say they want the zoos to be one thing, but that's not why they come to the zoo. So what we've decided is we need to capitalize on the fact that people are going to keep coming to the zoo, still make it fun, but then kind of sneak in the education, sneak in the research, try to inform those people and provide those services that people want us to provide while they're still having a good time. And that's tricky. And we're working on doing that. I think we're doing a better job. We're realizing things like signs, they don't work. We need people, we need interaction. People don't read signs. I think the average time spent at a sign at the Denver Zoo is 6 seconds. So they're not getting a lot out of it. Usually they don't even get the species name right. It's fascinating, but they won't read. So we need to use our docents, our volunteers, a lot of you are volunteers, to go out and help tell those stories. We need interactions. But we can also do research on our collections in the field. We can provide a lot of knowledge to help us understand the natural world. We can do that education both in the zoo and outside the zoo. What most people don't realize about Denver as well is we have an outreach program that goes to schools all over Colorado and even Wyoming. We're starting to do it in New Mexico, and I'll explain why. So we take animals to schools. The kids aren't going to come to us necessarily. We're going to take the animals to them, even if they're up in Wyoming or on the West Slope. And we're going to expose them to animals. We're going to take those urban kids, get them out of their classroom into parks. That's going to be key. The zoo's going to be a piece of that, but we're not going to limit ourselves to the zoo grounds. We need to make this education reach the people who need it the most, which I would argue are those kids who don't get a chance to see these animals or get into nature, depending where they are. And then conservation. We're going to do conservation in the zoo, and we're going to do conservation in the field. And my argument, and when they first were looking for a conservation director, that's what I told them. I said, if you want to be effective in conservation, you have to be field-based. A lot of zoos are focused on conservation efforts in the collection. That's not going to do it. That's not going to cut it. And I think zoos are starting to figure that out. So we're really interdisciplinary. So when zoos started first thinking about this, like in the 70s and 80s, they said, okay, this is what we can do. We can arc species. And what we mean by that is we can take species that are endangered in the wild and breed them in captivity and hold them until such time as we become more enlightened as a species. And we create better habitat for animals. We put them back in the wild. Once we have better habitat, we restore the habitat, blah, 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 blah. There's some problems with that. One is zoos don't have anywhere near the space. I think we could maybe keep a few species, and even the species we focus on, we're finding that we don't have sufficient space to keep large enough populations. Even though we work across zoos now to manage populations, we can't keep enough animals to keep genetic diversity high enough to really be successful at that, except for some things like maybe amphibians and fishes. And at Denver Zoo, we have several species of animals that are extinct in the wild, and we're breeding them in captivity, trying to restore their habitat. In the case of amphibians, trying to figure out how we can put them back in the wild when there's this terrible disease, it's called chytrid fungus, that's wiping them out. Until we can do that, we are going to arc some species. Also, we're not addressing the crux of the issue. that's giving the problem to someone else, right? You know, the reason species are going extinct is not because they need a zoo. We need to address the reason they're going extinct if we want to be successful at conservation. And we are giving that problem to someone else. We're saying, you solve it, not us. Well, that's kind of shirking our responsibility, we believe. Finally, I just think it's socially, ethically, and morally unacceptable. In today's society, zoos need to be relevant. We need to be relevant. We need to do conservation. And that means getting into the field, getting our hands dirty. Yet, it is still valuable in some cases, and I'll explain some cases where we have been successful in zoo-based conservation in arcing species. I just mentioned a couple of those. So today, we really recognize that we need to focus on conservation in the field. And again, there's several aspects to that. We do captive breeding for reintroduction. So on the far right, you see an Andean condor. We breed those animals at Denver Zoo, and we are releasing them into the wild in Colombia. So we are restoring a population of animals into the wild that has gone extinct in Colombia anyway. On the far left, you see Przewalski's horses, a place that's near and dear to my heart, Mongolia. The only truly wild horse in the world went extinct in the wild. Luckily, there were some zoos that had horses, including Denver. We have a very valuable genetic population at Denver Zoo. We breed those animals, and we've been re-releasing them into the wild. There are now 3 wild populations in Mongolia, I'm happy to say, and they're getting ready to reintroduce 1 in Kazakhstan and 2 in China. So we can play a role. In the middle is some work on assisted reproductive technologies that we also do to help breed some of those animals that we hope to release in the wild. So we can do that. It's going to be limited, but in cases we can do it. Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, just over the mountains here in Colorado Springs, is one of the most important breeding facilities for black-footed ferrets. I did my PhD on black-footed ferrets, near and dear to my heart. If it wasn't for zoos, I can tell you, black-footed ferrets would not exist in the world today. We also need to have field-based projects, and we have about, I'll talk about this later, but we have projects all over the world, and we're involved in training people and in conducting research that has applied very real-world implications so that we can help improve the prospects for survival of species all over the world. And then we need to link projects. The example here, I was talking to some people at my table about saiga. These are these funky-looking animals that, for those of you who are old enough like me to remember Alf, they kind of have a head like Alf, especially the males. They're not truly an antelope. They call them saiga antelope. They're not truly an antelope. They're not truly a capron or a goat. They're kind of their own thing. They're these crazy leftovers from the Pleistocene. We used to have them in North America, actually. And unfortunately, the males have those cool-looking horns, but the Chinese believe that they have all kinds of medicinal values. And so they've been wiping out populations. We went from about 30 million saiga about 30 years ago to about 50,000 today. So that's a pretty major decline. So how can we help? Well, one thing we found in working, where I've been working in Kalmykia, Russia, which is got a Mongolian population, strangely enough, on the west side of the Caspian Sea, is well, because they focus on the males, because they have the horns, that we now have a population that's largely devoid of males. So we don't have enough males to service the females. So in the near term, while we're trying to stem poaching, and we are trying to do that, what we can do is lend our captive breeding expertise to the people of Kalmykia, which we have done, build this facility, which we've done, and then every year what we do is release males. We release mature males to help service as many females as possible, knowing full well that a lot of them are going to be poached. Again, we are working on the poaching problem. Denver Zoo itself has donated several motorcycles to the rangers, done a lot of ranger training to try to stem poaching. But in the near term, until we get a handle on it, we can release those males, and at least we can keep that reproduction going. And so it's a great way that we combine a mix of field and zoo-based conservation. And then we do collaboration, as I mentioned. We have these things called taxon advisory groups, tags, SSP, species survival plans, conservation action plans, all these acronyms. We love acronyms we're kind of like the government in the zoo world. We love our little acronyms. But it's a way that zoos can work together across institutions to really garner expertise from different places, but also resources. Breeding, as I mentioned earlier, we can breed species across several institutions. But we can also conduct research, and we can donate funds. If you're a smaller zoo in particular, like Cheyenne Mountain Zoo or Pueblo Zoo, they can combine their resources with other zoos so they have a bigger pot of money to really make a difference. So $1,000 from Pueblo might not matter, but when you pair it with the fact that there's, 260 some odd accredited zoos in the United States, if you get 50 of them to put in 1,000, that's something, $50,000. You can do something then. So we try to work together. A core to everything we do at Denver is capacity building. So we have kind of 4 cores. One is we base everything on good, strong science. We do education outreach. I'll talk about that a little bit. We want to influence policy. But I would argue the thing that's nearest and dearest to my heart is capacity building. Everywhere we go, we are building capacity. So when I talk about the successes Denver Zoo had, I want to make it clear that it's not me and it's not the people sitting in Denver. When I talk about the successes we've had in Mongolia, it's the Mongolians. It's the people we've helped train. Those people are bright, they're dedicated, they're committed. All they need is training and resources. We're trying to provide that. And I'm a firm believer that you take that training and those resources, you give it to somebody who can take their knowledge of their local culture, combine it with that training, they're going to be a zillion times more effective than I'm ever going to be at doing conservation in their own country. And there's been a lot of talk about conservation imperialism. This is the opposite of that. We need to empower those people. We need to train rangers. We need to get advanced degrees for people. Another thing we do is all of our field projects, we have all our major field projects, we set up women's groups. I'm a firm believer that if you empower women, you're going to have huge success in conservation. Men in developing countries and poor countries are concerned about tomorrow, putting food on the table. Women are concerned about the long-term future, the future of their kids, more than men. It's a gross generalization. I'm not bashing you men. But it's generally true. Plus, if you empower women, they make better decisions about reproduction. They make better decisions about their family, and they care about the environment. So we do a lot of capacity building at Denver Zoo, even in the United States. We're working with tribes. We're working in the communities in which we have projects to empower those people. We have citizen science programs. Here in the Rockies, pica projects. I'll talk about some of that. So a few years ago, a bunch of us put together a paper because we knew that zoos were trying to become more conservation-oriented, and we're really moving that way. Now, to be accredited, you have to have a conservation program. To be accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, you have to have a conservation program. Have we gone far enough? I will argue no, not even close. And so a few years ago, we put together some criteria in a paper we published in Conservation Biology about what should zoos look like if they really want to be conservation organizations, and they all say they do. Zoos are now all calling themselves conservation organizations. So one is we should let our conservation help direct policy decisions and define what we're doing. We should provide significant funding. Right now, it's a pittance of what zoos' overall budget is. Collectively, it's huge. I think last year, $300 million or something from zoos in the United States and Canada went to field conservation. That's a lot of money. Relative to the general operating budgets of those zoos and aquariums, it's a tiny percentage. And except for a few notable exceptions, most zoos are providing less than 3% of their budget, on the order of 1 or 2. That's not enough. It's not going to get the job done. We need every zoo and aquarium should have a conservation department like we have. They should have dedicated staff focused on doing conservation in the field. We should be able to advocate for conservation. A lot of zoos see them, and ours included, see themselves as non-advocatory groups, but I think there's times when we should be able to advocate. And we need to be careful because we play a great role by being seen as a non-advocacy group. We can bring together very disparate sides. We had a meeting on prairie dogs a few years ago, and we had the Cattle Growers Association, and we also had animal rights groups at the same meeting. And I don't think any other organization could have done that. Because we are pretty much seen as, impartial, whether that's true or not, but it gives us the ability to do things. But there are cases right now, we're going to start working on an effort to ban the sale of ivory in Colorado. There are loopholes in the federal law. We need to close those loopholes. States one by one are passing legislation. We need to be one of those states. Look for that, help us, sign a petition, help stop this flow of ivory that's killing our elephants and funding our terrorists. We need conservation education programs, and we need to address not just children like we tend to focus on in zoos, but adults. I'm a strong believer that we need to focus on children, but we don't have the luxury of waiting until those children grow up. We're in a crisis now. We also have to focus on adults. We We need to protect habitat. It can't just be animals. So as we all know, I'm sure you all know, that the biggest challenge facing conservation is lack of habitat or degradation of habitat. There's a lot of other big problems, but that's by far the biggest one. We are now consuming about 60% of the Earth's resources. Out of the energy that reaches the Earth, we use 60% of it. That's not leaving a lot for other critters. And as our population continues to grow and quality of life continues to improve in the developing world, resource use is going up, and soon we're going to have nothing left for other species. And then our exhibits should promote conservation. It's something we're trying to work on at Denver, and other zoos have far exceeded us, I would say, argue, and done a much better job at developing exhibit designs that tell a conservation story well and generate even funding for conservation. We should have green practices. At Denver Zoo, we are the greenest zoo in the world, I'm happy to say. We are the only zoo that's ISO 18001 certified, which means our whole operation is sustainable and safe. We are going to a zero waste stream by 2025. We're going to take all of our waste and convert it to pellets and create fuel, and no, it's not going to cause a lot of pollution. We're going to take the ash and use it to fertilize our gardens. We are hoping to become the leader. We are the leader. There's no zoo that's doing as much. We got the first Green Award. And I'm proud of us for doing that. You know, you can eat every... You can eat our utensils and our plates. You can eat our cups. They look like plastic, but they're made of cornstarch. And everything will be recycled. The thing that's going to be the trickiest for us is the stuff that people bring in, not the stuff we're buying. And we're going to try to control that, but that's going to be tricky, right? And then we need to fully support all these organizational groups, taxon advisory groups, et cetera. So what about us? The main components, and I mentioned this briefly, one is that we need to base it on sound science. So we call them the 4 pillars. And that includes social science. We need to understand what our situation is before we start moving on actions. So we often start with research. And then we need to include education outreach components. I just talked about the importance of this. If we don't have local people on our side, we're going to fail. Simple as that. We need to build capacity. I've talked a little bit about that. Oops. And we need to influence policy and management. It's not enough to say we're going to do these things. We need to change things at the governmental level. We need to pass new laws when it's appropriate. We need to create new protected areas. We need to, in some cases, like in Mongolia, we need to arm our rangers, because right now they can't carry weapons. That's a silly law. We need to change it. We need to change policies that don't make sense. We need to conserve nature. So that's what we're based on. Since '96, when they hired me, we've been involved in over 600 projects on all 7 continents in 58 countries. And last year, about 100 projects in 18 countries in 4 continents. And what you're seeing is that when we started, we kind of took a shotgun approach to conservation, and we've been focusing in since then. We're really starting to narrow our breadth and do more depth of work, and I'll talk about that a little bit too. Staff-wise, we've gone from just me, and then just me and my buddy Brian Miller, until just a few years ago, we've really started to grow. Now we have 15 staff based in the US, 14 overseas, a bunch of interns. Research associates are people who do not pay but affiliate themselves with us, often to run money through us. And then we are very unique in the zoo world in that we involve about 70 staff this year. Last year was 69 staff. So we take staff from other departments, we take the expertise they have, and we involve them in our field projects. And that's not just keepers. We take our maintenance people and they go over and help build stuff. We take our people from accounting, we take people from marketing. You know, we have a problem with Lake Titicaca frogs I'll tell you about. We need some PR. We need some PR now. So why don't we rely on our PR people? They know what they're doing. I don't know how to do that. So we involve staff all over. No other zoo does that. But I'm a firm believer that we have to involve everybody. If we're calling ourselves a conservation organization, we should all be involved at some level. And so you're not going to see another zoo that has more than about 10 or 15 people involved in conservation outside of their program. And in most zoos, it's maybe 5. So we're very different that way. And I'm proud of it. So what we've decided to do more recently is really focus in on a few focal areas. And these are our focal areas as of today. Mongolia, Botswana, especially the Kalahari region and the western United States, Rocky Mountain, Great Plains. What we try to do is we try to go to places where there's not a lot of other people working. There's too much, I don't want to compete. There's too much work that needs to be done for us to spend time competing. And for a while that would happen. You know, we were doing work in the Caribbean on iguanas for a long time, and there was another zoo, and they wanted to be the iguana people, and they kept chasing us around the Caribbean trying to do the same project we were. And I just kept saying, you can have that. You know, there's another iguana. Take it. You know, I don't want to fight you for iguanas. We'll go do something else. There's too little time for us to be engaged in internecine warfare. We got to work together cooperatively, and we got to find places like Mongolia where no one's working, like the Kalahari. Everyone in Botswana is in the Okavango. Nobody's in the Kalahari. And of course, the Rocky Mountain Great Plains is because, well, we're based there. We're looking at establishing one in Peru, Bolivia, in the Altiplano. Again, everybody in Peru and Bolivia is down in the Amazon rain basin. Nobody is focused on the Altiplano, and there's incredible critters up there like flamingos and guanacos and vicuñas and chinchillas, which are endangered because people like to wear them, and on and on and on, all these amazing animals that are in trouble, and nobody, we talk to the governments in those countries, nobody's working on them. So we're thinking, hey, maybe that's a place where we can work. So again, one thing we tried to do immediately was create a culture of conservation within the organization. Walk the walk. I talked about our green policies. I talked about involving staff. And then giving our staff to really connect to what we're doing overseas, because when they do that, they're the ones who actually engage, our department doesn't, with all those visitors. And so they're going to be able to tell that story better than we ever can. Just like when I work with people overseas, you work with the people who are going to reach more people, and that's going to be our staff, our keepers, our education staff, which is excellent and large. And even the people on the grounds and maintenance, they actually interact with a lot of guests. And now they can tell conservation stories. They've been out. Our maintenance people go out. Our grounds people come and help us. They know a lot about plants. They're amazing people. Tell that story. So let me tell you a little bit about what we do and some of the stuff we do. The one that's nearest and dearest to you guys probably is the Rocky Mountain Great Plains region, and we do quite a bit of work here. Again, most people don't probably realize we do some work on bison. We have some citizen science programs that some of you might want to even get involved in. We have one on pikas, and what we're doing is monitoring pikas. It's a collaboration with CU and with Rocky Mountain Wild, and we have citizens going in and checking the mountains to see if pika are still present. If you don't know, with climate change and global warming, pikas are being pushed off the top of mountains. And what's happening is it's ironic, but the global warming is leading to pikas freezing to death. And the reason that's happening is the snow melts. You don't have that snow and ice, and the pikas use it like an igloo, and it keeps them warm. So you can look at our data loggers, and you can see the temperature when we have a steady snow cover on the high altitude areas, and it's stable, right at about 32 degrees. But when we don't have that snow cover, it fluctuates greatly, and it dips down really cold up on those high mountaintops, down to minus 30, minus 40, and those pikas freeze to death. Because they live under the snow, where it's only minus 32. I mean, only 32. Sorry. You can get involved in that. Our Witness for Wildlife, this is a road crossing. So we work with DOT, again, Rocky Mountain Wild, and we've been looking at I-70 as our first place. We've been putting camera traps up to look at where the wildlife crosses, and based on the data we collected, we found our first site that DOT has embraced. There's going to be a wildlife crossing, maybe you've heard of it, over near Vail Pass. They're going to build a multi-million-dollar structure to let the wildlife cross that huge barrier to movement of wildlife. We're continuing to collect data. Ours will be the first study that ever looked at what happens after you build it. So a lot of people have collected data, then built the overpasses, and then they've gone away. We're going to be the first ones to continue collecting data through construction till the end to see how much an impact it's made. But we're also continuing to look at other places. Where else do we need wildlife crossings? Look for us to be doing more citizen science. I think it's a great way to involve people. And I think there's ample opportunity, as you guys all show, because so many of you are volunteers. I know there's almost no staff on GARNA. What people like you can do to make a difference is truly awe-inspiring and humbling to someone like me. We also run a refuge right down in northern New Mexico, just across the border. We run a national wildlife refuge for the Fish and Wildlife Service. They don't have the resources. So we have a partnership. We actually manage the reserve for them. We've reintroduced bison, we've reintroduced prairie dogs. The bison are owned by the Pueblo of Pewaukee, a tribe. They own the bison, we manage them, they harvest them. It's a great collaboration. We're working to train tribal people to do wildlife conservation as well. We shouldn't just focus on local people overseas, we should focus on local people here too. We're also focusing on the people in northern New Mexico, one of the poorest regions in the United States. So you want to see, I think they're 49th or 50th in the country. The poorest part of New Mexico is right across your border. Just go south there a little bit and you'll see the poorest part of the United States. So we want to work with those people. We want to show them that conservation is in their best interest. We'll show them why. We're doing a lot of restoration. It's incredible stuff. We're taking dry arroyos that are cut solid, and we're showing them how to make them into swales that have now marshes in them. They have wetlands. We've recreated wetlands and cut dry arroyos by doing very simple, and the key is to make it simple because so anybody can do it. Any rancher, any landowner can do it. Simple structures to collect that sediment, build back up the soil, slow the water down, and let the wetlands come back. Really amazing stuff. We do a lot of work with prairie dogs and associated species, and we do research on bison. Our longest focal area is Mongolia. I came to Colorado from Mongolia. That's where I lived before I came here. We have a great program in Mongolia. Here's a research station in a park. It started off as nothing. Now we have these yurts or gers, as the Mongolians call them. We have all kinds of facilities. This is the only research station in Mongolia that operates 365 days a year. We now run this protected area. It went from a paper park, no one knew it was a park, that's what I mean by paper, it existed on paper, to, in 2010, the United Nations adopting it as a model protected area. That's what we want. It's beautiful. And we study almost everything. And we use this as a laboratory and a training grounds for Mongolian students. One of the best compliments I ever got was from the Nature Conservancy. I think Paul got my name from Chris Pegg of the Nature Conservancy, and they opened up a shop there in Mongolia, and they thanked me, and I said, for what? And they said, well, everybody we interviewed trained with you. And I said, good. That's the service I want to provide. I want these NGOs to be run by Mongolians. I don't want Americans going over and running NGOs. What we do in Mongolia is we send people over for a couple of weeks every month, but the Mongolians are doing the work. So we have a staff of 10, they're all Mongolians. I don't have any permanent US citizens based in Mongolia. I have Mongolians based in Mongolia. They're doing the work. They're setting up the women's groups. They're setting up the local communities. And it's been incredibly successful. We collect the data. The data showed that a lot of important habitat fell outside the park. And guess what? The local communities set up local protected areas to protect those key habitats. We didn't even ask them to do it. So we build first local support. We get that data. Unlike the kind of negative kind of backlash you have towards creation of protected areas by local people in America, it's almost the opposite in Mongolia, where the local people like the protected areas. They have this affinity and attachment to nature, and they're working with us, and we're helping to engender that and continue that feeling of love and respect for nature, so that we can continue to expand protected areas and work with local people. The name of the women's cooperative, the name of this protected area is ICNART. The name of the women's cooperative, they name themselves, ICNART is our future. They get it. I'm really proud of my Mongolian team. Everyone gets it. One of the Mongolian herders came to us and said, you know, there was mining here before it was a park. Can you help me write a grant to restore those mining areas? I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. We said, yes, we got the grant. The herders did it. They did the restoration work. We didn't do it. That's what we need to do. We need models like this that we're now disseminating to other parts of the world and other parts of Mongolia, where the local people love and want to protect their protected area, want to expand it, and have a stake in its success. They're getting money from tourism, they're getting money from the Women's Cooperative, they're realizing real significant benefits, and guess what? Wildlife populations have doubled, tripled. It's been a win-win-win. Great stuff. Capacity building, I just talked about how we've trained people that are now work for NGOs, for the government, for universities, for the Academy of Sciences. They're everywhere, and it's one of the things I'm most proud of, is that these young Mongolians, some of the young Mongolians I trained are now, one of them is the state secretary for the environment. I couldn't be more proud. That guy's now having huge influence. That's what I want. Another woman, she is now the head of international relations for the Ministry of Nature and Environment. These are people we trained, so Denver Zoo's having an impact, I guarantee it. Our conservation education program, amazing. We do school exchanges from Denver to Mongolia. The kids love it. The local communities can't believe that people are interested in their little, what they consider like a podunk school, and they're coming to teach them. We have nomadic trunks because they're nomadic peoples. Those trunks move around with little education programs. Some stuff they get to keep. They learn, trunk moves on to another place. Really cool stuff. Our third focal area right now is Botswana. It's our most recent one. We have all kinds of projects there as well. Primarily, we focus on large carnivores and the conflicts on the edges of protected areas, but that also got us then to work on ungulates. Things like wildebeest in the central Kalahari went from about 150,000 in 1980 to about 500 last year. So we need to understand why these ungulates are declining if we hope to stem large carnivore problems. If we want the carnivores to eat things other than cows, those things have to exist. So great study by one of our, again, all Botswana students, one of our students who's just finishing up on the wildebeest. The government is already taking, he hasn't even finished yet, taking his recommendations from his PhD and implementing them. I think it's going to make a big difference in wildebeest populations. Because people don't like lions and wild dogs, they poison a carcass when those animals kill one of their cows, and they kill vultures en masse. They don't want to kill vultures. That got us involved in vulture conservation. Vultures, if you don't know, as a group, are declining more than any other group in the world today. We need to do something about it. We need to do something about it fast. We also found out that lead is a problem, like with condors. We also found out that elephant poaching is a problem for vultures. So now we're doing elephant work. Why is elephant and rhino poaching a problem? Well, because the poachers have realized that when they kill an elephant, the first thing that happens is the vultures start to circle. Well, guess what? The rangers realize that too. So now what the vultures are doing, and it's insidious, is they're killing those they want to wipe them out. The last vulture we had that we tagged, it was actually on a buffalo carcass. And they've gotten so smart that they're now killing a buffalo over here, then going to poach over there, so all vultures are already circling over here and drawing law enforcement in the wrong place. We're working with law enforcement. They're flying us out in their helicopters when we find a signal of a dead vulture to try to get there as soon as possible. So it's all interrelated. It's important stuff, it's good stuff. And we also have, of course, outreach and education. We've got an innovative program where we take local kids who have often never seen a lion or an elephant or a giraffe, and we take them into the field with our researchers, who, again, remember, these are Botswana researchers. So they see, hey, I can actually be a wildlife biologist if I want. They see nature, but they also see the opportunities that maybe they never even realized they could have. They stay in a camp and they realize, hey, these camp guides are all Botswanans too, and we're making money off it, and we're staying in this beautiful camp. So what we're doing is we're educating them, but we're exposing them to a world of possibilities that they did not know existed. Another very cool program, if you ask me. Again, other projects, I'm not going to go into a lot of them, but one of our big one is Lake Titicaca frogs in Peru. We do a few other things in Peru. Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world, sits at like 12,500 feet. And these frogs are in trouble mostly because people blend them up, like bassomatic, for those of you who remember, because they believe it's good for your libido and rheumatism. So they drink frog shakes. So again, why do I need to involve our PR department? Well, one program that's been really successful has been with sea turtle eggs. And what they did is local people in El Salvador thought that sea turtle eggs were also good for your libido. So their PR group came up with this great idea. We're going to get really sexy models, and we're going to play on the machoism of the Latino culture and say, you know, my man doesn't need a turtle egg. Well, we're going to do the same thing. My guy doesn't need a frog shake. A real man doesn't need a frog shake. And we're going to launch a big campaign in the cities. The local people don't eat them. They don't blend them into shakes. It's just the city people. And we're going to launch a campaign to tell people that frog shakes don't do it for you, man. And there's no evidence. There is evidence that one of the roots that they blend in that shake does have an effect. And so that's another part of the education program. It's the root. It's not the frog. Cool stuff. We have a big project in Vietnam. These Tonkin snub-nosed monkeys, about 150 left, one of the most endangered species in the world. And look at that face, so cool. Again, working with a broad-based program with education. We've done some elephant stuff, another one of our main projects. And really I could go on, the stuff we do in Kenya and Gobi zebras, and with a school for girls. It's a girls' school that we work with to give them, again, opportunities that they might not ever have growing up, and then helping them find placement in jobs and careers from extraordinarily poor families. Because, again, educate your women, and you're going to do one of the best things you can do for the environment. I guarantee it. The data are strong. Our global goods program, those women's groups, they're not just selling to tourists. We are now selling that stuff in the zoo. We have a global market section, and what we're trying to do is spread it so that all the zoos now have global market sections and create demand so those women's groups get even more money for their incredibly beautiful products that they make. You know, some of the stuff, I mean, these hats they make, they knit these hats for us. They make jewelry. The Maasai people make beautiful jewelry, felt products from Mongolia. This stuff is gorgeous. Let's empower them. Let's let them realize that people in the world do care about them as people, and they do want to thank them for what they're doing to conserve their natural resources and their wildlife by buying their products. That's what our marketing strategy is about here, and it's working. And I think it's going to work even more if we can expand it. So I think I'm right about where I should be at 45 minutes. So that's just kind of a brief overview. I think what we do is pretty cool. I'm really biased. I don't do it. My team does it, so if you want to thank people, thank them. Incredible group of people, incredible group of mostly women, but also some great guys, because really conservation is becoming women-dominated. I don't know why. Come on, guys, let's get it together. Not that that's a bad thing, it's a good thing. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.